All team, give it everything you got.
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
I don't think there's anything more important in the Star Wars universe than the fans.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
With your hosts, Teresa Delgado, Tricia Barr, and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
This is a Fangirls Going Rogue priority transmission.
We are so excited to have with us today a co-host of the popular Star Wars podcast, Star Wars Oxygen, as well as a host at Star Wars Celebration and a voice in Star Wars The Force Awakens, David W. Collins. Hi, David.
Hi, you guys. It's so great to be on here. Thank you so much for having me on this episode.
Yeah, no problem. We have been wanting to have you for a while, and then when I got to hang out with you for the Rebel Force Radio meetup, I was like, okay, I have to actually meet him in person finally.
Yeah,
and it was awesome.
Yeah, because I think you were the last person that we hadn't met in person until June.
Yep.
Well,
all
thank
right.
you so much.
Well, no problem. And also, obviously, Tricia, you're here. How are you doing, Tricia?
I am so buzzed because I listen to Star Wars Oxygen faithfully, one of my favorite shows. So glad to have you on and get some personal insights from you.
Oh, that's so nice. I'm so glad. Thanks for listening. I'm glad you enjoy it.
And we know Sarah listens all the time because Sarah's a super, super music nerd. So, Sarah, how are you today, too?
I am doing great, and that's right. I am a film music buff, and we've even had David Collins on Skywalking Through Neverland to talk about film music and Disney music. So we hope to continue that conversation here on Fangirls Going Rogue, as well as some of your other interests.
Yeah, that sounds great. In fact, I remember you played the French horn. Well, no, you still do.
I do a little bit, not as much as I did, obviously, when you're a kid.
Yeah, I remember mentioning one of your. I think you sent a mail. This was a couple years ago, saying, "Yeah, it prompted me to get my French horn back out and actually start playing it a little bit." And I was like, "Oh man, doing this, people dig it." You know?
Yeah,
that's awesome because I think all of us play instruments here. Because I play the violin and the piano.
I didn't know that. You
yeah,
the piano. How long have you been playing the violin?
I've been playing the violin since I was 11. And I've been playing piano since I was like 3.
That's amazing.
And then Tricia, you too.
Yeah, I was piano. I was a flute player and a French horn player and gave up those pursuits to dance in college. But all through high school, definitely did the John Williams and all that stuff. That's how I learned to play, was that music.
Well, you guys are all probably better piano players than I am. I struggle through every week. And just, hold on, Jimmy, I got to do that one more time. You know, like...
Well, it sounds good on the show.
Oh, good. Yeah, we finally get there eventually.
So we start off all of our interviews with 2 questions. So the first one is, in your opinion, has fandom changed since Disney bought Star Wars?
Has fandom changed? Yeah, I suppose a little bit in that... Well, it's so funny. Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed in that Star Wars has so dramatically changed. You know, I mean, when... we were in a pre-Disney Star Wars era. We had the Clone Wars, the fantastic Clone Wars. But that was kind of the extent of it. I mean, we had Star Wars games and things, but now there's so much. And, a new movie every year plus TV shows. And I know you guys, have brought up Lego Freemaker on your show before, plus Rebels, plus the games, plus the comics and the toys and everything. There's so much to take in now. And there's a little something I feel like for everybody. You know, I'm a diehard Clone Wars fan, but not all of Star Wars fandom was watching the Clone Wars. But it seems like now everybody's tuned into something, and I think that's probably in how it seems to have changed the most. In fact, I was saying to somebody recently about Star Wars Celebration how much that has changed in the last 2 years, simply because exhausting in the best way now. Like it was always like high energy, but every single panel is something new with new content to cover. You know, you're very rarely retreading something, and instead you're talking about something new that's coming out. And because of that, I think fandom's definitely changed. It's a hugely creative era for Star Wars and for Lucasfilm under Kathy Kennedy and Disney.
So has your personal Star Wars fandom changed at all?
Is that, yeah, I mean, I was going to say, is that the second question or extension?
No, that's an extension question.
Yeah.
No, that's a great question. I actually had this interesting thing happen when I stopped working at Lucasfilm, and that was when I moved here in 2011 to LA. I left LucasArts, and my fandom just surged. Like it just blew up because suddenly I wasn't working on it every day. So if I didn't have it in my life, you know, every day I suddenly wanted it. I really, really started craving more Star Wars. You know, it was really, really fun. That was a huge change. And I have to say the lead up to The Force Awakens made me feel like I was a little kid. I mean, it was such an exciting lead up. And I was so determined not to experience any spoilers until, I went in and did some voices on it for a day and saw it. But until that point, I almost made it. It was just so exciting. I mean, the Force Friday thing and, being with a whole crowd of people hanging out in a Toys R Us parking lot at midnight on a Thursday. It was just the most surreal thing. It's just, it's really fun. And since moving here, going to Disneyland all the time and the Disney sale coinciding with moving here and going to Disneyland all the time.
And the fact that we can see Star Wars Land taking shape.
Yeah, that's a big change. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just kind of blowing up all around us. And yeah, I guess it changed for me in that I went from working at the company to not doing anything Star Wars at all to now, doing Star Wars Oxygen as of 2013, making appearances on the Star Wars show, the Comlink, Force Awakens, working on some of the games. So I've been kind of working on it again, which has been really nice. And so I feel like it's been a really good place to be in. And of course, Celebration, I just love. What about you guys? Has it changed for you in the last couple of years?
Oh, man. Nobody ever asked us our questions.
Well, the podcasting thing kind of blew up for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I think all three of us, we all came into the podcasting thing around the same time. Well, Tricia, you and me together, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Teresa and I started late night covering Celebration Europe the last time, not this London, but the previous one. And so before the sale, we were just, so excited to be fans. And then all of a sudden our fandom's growing and we want to know more. And I remember our most popular episode from that coverage was the Kathleen Kennedy episode. And just to see her get recognized, it's been fun. Going through that.
That was really cool. And the funny thing when we think about that, I kind of rewind, is when I used to edit those and make them into YouTube videos, and I thought I was so cool at the time.
Don't you love it how we grow? Well, I want to ask you, David, one of our second questions is, if your house is burning, which one Star Wars item do you run back in for?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. Which Star Wars item do I go back in for? Well, first I want to say my hard drives that have all my podcasts on, and all the work on music stuff that I've done. So I'd want to grab my computer, but I have this, I guess it was a team gift from Star Wars Republic Commando, which is this kind of bronze statue that Gentle Giant made in 2004. 2004 or 2005, maybe it was 2005. That was a team gift, and so there was only 100 made. And it sits on one of my speakers in my studio, and I just kind of cherish that thing because it was such a special project for me, and it's very rare, and I would probably take that. It's this figure of these 4 Republic Commandos kind of in their key positions of Delta Squad, all on just a giant mound, and then it says Star Wars Republic Commando on the front. And I can't tell you how happy I was when they made it into an episode of the Clone Wars in 2012, I think. I would take that. It's really hard to choose, man.
You can pick more than one thing. You can run and grab.
You can run and just grab as you go.
Yeah.
that's probably a big one. I also have a Darth Vader lightsaber, one of the old Gentle Giant. Was it Gentle Giant who had the first license for the
Master replicas?
The
Force Effects sabers. I have that entire collection.
Yeah, so I have the Vader one. I would probably grab that as well because they don't make them anymore, and I love that thing. That's probably it.
Those are good picks. Good picks.
Oh, thanks.
So we know that you have a little one coming, and I had this occur to me that I would love to know if you've thought about it, and maybe you haven't. How do you think you might introduce Star Wars to them when they're old enough?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, we do have a little one coming, and I was saying to you guys before, I have 6 nieces, and some of them are into Star Wars and some of them aren't, and the ones that are into Star Wars are super into Star Wars. We're expecting a boy, and between I think my brother and my wife's sisters. I don't think that we've come to a consensus on what to expose them to first. But it seems like they pick up on the costumes first, and then they pick up on children's books. Like my niece Riley found a Clone Wars book with, Jabba the Hutt's son, Stinky, on the cover. She found it at a library, and she started reading it, and nobody prompted her to do it. She saw Star Wars, and she just started reading it. And that was a Clone Wars children's book. We've given them coloring books. I've read them storybooks and things like that. But when it comes to TV, I would honestly say the thing that I'm most excited about right now is the Lego Star Wars The Freemaker Adventures. I feel like that's this show that if people don't know about it, they need to know about that show. I know you guys have talked about this show before because I did a panel with them at Celebration in London. And then I just loved, the 2 creators of the show, Bill and Bob. I love talking to them so much. We had lunch a couple weeks ago here, just chatting about the show. And it's just so inclusive and so character-driven, but funny. It's not just a parody of Star Wars. It's its own thing, but it's still Star Wars and kind of goes all over the place and covers all the prequel movies and the sequel or the classic trilogy. And I'm looking forward to kind of the Lego introduction and playing Lego Star Wars. But I don't know. I don't know when you can show them the movies. I think I saw it before I had memory of seeing it. I was 2 when the first one came out. So I've always known Star Wars before I knew what it was. In fact, when I found out about NASA and there was no sound in space, I was so disappointed because I was like, what? There's no sound in space? There's no X-Wings? There's no jets flying around? It takes you forever to get to one rock and there's no other planet. I was really into Star Wars as a kid and just always knew it. And so I don't remember the first time I saw the movie. But one of my first movie theater experiences was the re-release of Empire Strikes Back. And then when I saw Return of the Jedi with my grandfather in 1983, that was a huge experience for me. So, as they get older, taking them to the movies, I remember taking my niece Riley to see Frozen. And I swear that was just as big of a memory for me as it was for her, because it was like watching this kid have this transformative experience in a theater, And then I took her to see, with the rest of the family, see The Force Awakens last Christmas as well. And it was the same thing. I posted a picture on Instagram of her like touching this poster of Rey out in the desert, and like you can clearly kind of see her identifying with it. So like I get excited about those moments, with either my newborn son, coming up, or my nieces. I don't know. I don't know what the magic formula is. What do you guys think? I mean, what do people say you should? I should be taking advice from you.
Well, it's funny because none of us have kids, but I have 2 nephews. My youngest nephew is 7, and we sort of introduced both of the boys to Star Wars through, at the time movies weren't coming out, but we introduced it to them very similar how you were talking about books, through books. And if the little golden books had been around when they were little, I would have used those. So the little golden books. But then also, I love that you said Lego, because my youngest nephew, who's 7, we started him off with Lego sets that were Star Wars, and we helped him put them together. And he's 7 now, and he can do the Lego architecture sets by himself.
Wow. Because
we started him so early. And I really wish that they would make Duplo Legos that are Star Wars. because they have the Duplo Disney, like in the Disney princesses and stuff, but they don't have Star Wars or Marvel, which they need to do. The big ones, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And we all love ABC.
Yes.
3P. Yeah, ABC 3PO is one of my favorite books. So that definitely something you can read over and over again and enjoy as an adult with a kid.
Maybe that's how you can start, David.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to do it. You know what else I've been thinking, and this is probably the first answer I should have given, which is, I got a piano a couple years ago, not just like a keyboard, but an actual upright piano, and just been playing the thing nonstop because I've always wanted to have a piano. I didn't grow up with one in the house and had a little Casio keyboard growing up, But now we have an actual piano, and I play the thing nonstop. And I must confess I have plans to start any child that is in this house on some kind of formal music lesson and do fun ear training games and things like that. I have a, quote, easy John Williams Star Wars piano reduction book. No, they're not that easy. They're actually pretty advanced because the music's very advanced. And so I would definitely also be exposing kids to music and playing all those stuff, playing it in the house, playing it on. I actually have a record player, but I also, we of course have Spotify and iTunes and all that kind of stuff. But that'll be going nonstop, and so I'm hoping there's a musical curiosity as well, because for me it was very much an introduction to orchestral music, and I think it's one of the reasons why people are still talking about it. It's relevant in movies in a way that isn't part of people's everyday lives, and it really is movies and TV and these kind of genres like Star Wars that have kept that kind of music in our consciousness, and I definitely will continue that.
Well, speaking of film music, were you at the Hollywood Bowl this past weekend watching the John Williams concert?
I had 2 tickets. And for Sunday. Uh-huh. And a fever ran through this house.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Oh. And so we were both down and out, and it's funny because I'm really bummed we missed the concert, but I'm not bummed we didn't go because it was a rough evening, and there's just something about, I wouldn't have felt right about, fighting through all the traffic, sitting there, while my wife was up, and expecting. I just couldn't do it. So we didn't go. However, we had a good week because, I had bought tickets to the John Williams show. She had bought 2 tickets to see Newsies.
Yes! Oh, yes!
Which was on tour, and it was playing at the Pantages. So on Wednesday night, we went and saw Newsies, which was incredible.
Yay!
At the Pantages. So we got to do that. So we got to do 1 out of 2. So we had a really good week,
Okay.
She really, she would, when she saw it was coming into town, she grabbed 2 tickets, and we had the best time. Went to dinner out, first, and then saw the show. And the show is so good. And I really was bummed about the John Williams thing, but I'm hoping that he'll keep doing it. And I hear he talked about episode 8 again.
Yes. Well, luckily, so I was there on Sunday night. Richard and I were there, and we did get some sound bites, which will be out on episode 135 of Skywalking Through Neverland this week. So we can bring you a little bit of the concert.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. I hear it was amazing, and he played a bunch of different stuff, including some stuff from Hook, and of course a lot of Star Wars, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool to hear Rey's theme live for the first time.
Oh, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up Newsies because it's coming to Austin too, and so I'm going to go see it, and I'm super excited. What was your favorite song that they did? Because I've been in love with Newsies since it came it was a movie. Newsies is my soul.
Seize the
one
day.
of the things. Yes. So what was your favorite song?
It's funny because Carrying the Banner is kind of the big one through the first act, and when I was, confession, I come from a theater background, and when I was in high school, did some I was part of a children's theater network that toured, and we did a show one year that was kind of like a musical review, and we grabbed a couple from Newsies, which was this Disney movie that was woefully unheard of by a lot of people. But our theater director loved it. So we did Carrying the Banner Through It All. And someone sang Santa Fe. It wasn't me, but I remember doing that number. And I had never seen the movie, and to this day, still haven't seen the movie.
Oh my God, David.
Okay, movie time.
Yeah, you need to see the movie.
Yeah, I know. But I knew Carrying the Banner, I knew Santa Fe, I knew Seize the Day, I knew King of New York, I knew all those. But I had just, you mentioned Star Wars Oxygen. I just had an episode where I got to interview Robert Lopez about Frozen and how he was working on the Broadway musical and how he had to write and is continuing to work on, so much more material. And so watching it through Lauren's eyes, who had the movie memorized, she was so interested in how they changed the characters and how they added new songs to it. And she actually thought that the story for the Broadway adaptation was stronger than the movie story.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You do? You agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't want to give it away. I don't know if it's common knowledge. So, and especially if you're going to go see it, don't want to give too much away. But they made some significant character changes, apparently for the better, is what Lauren was telling me, my wife. And one of, there's this female character, one of her songs was so compelling. It's almost like this patter song. That one just floored me. It was such a great performance. But yeah, I mean, the dancing numbers, you just can't get over like the opening of the thing. I mean, there's like flipping around and singing their butts off and like, it's really impressive. The whole thing's really impressive.
Did you happen to grab a newspaper at halftime?
I didn't.
At halftime.
I know. I couldn't think of the name. It's not halftime. Intermission. Thank you. Yeah. So Teresa, if you happen to be in the audience close to the front somewhere, or just run down there and grab a newspaper, and that's like it's a free takeaway from
cool.
the Broadway. See, I didn't know that when I went and saw it, but.
Yeah, I didn't get the newspaper at halftime, but I did grab a playbill at the 7th inning stretch. So
There you go.
No, I didn't. I didn't see the newspapers. They had a bunch of people. There were a lot of people actually cosplaying in the audience. The audience was like a rock concert. I mean, people were screaming. It was like you feel like you're in a Broadway show, but like the cheers went on forever. It was actually a really fun experience.
Oh,
awesome. I thought it was interesting listening to that Oxygen episode. I didn't think about the storytelling, how it would be different to do it in a musical theater as opposed to doing it in a movie where you can't do action and you can't do close-ups on characters. So I had never even thought about that until he talked about having to write more songs to put it on Broadway.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating? Everything on stage is a wide shot, right? So you can't force the audience's eye to look at a character in a certain way. You can a little with lighting, but it's so much easier to do with music and much broader strokes. Yeah, when he was talking about Hans and how do you show Hans as dreamy and then later have him, be the villain. Really interesting.
So you brought up Frozen, and I have to ask you, Frozen or Tangled?
Frozen.
Oh?
Frozen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, I love Tangled. I think Tangled is great. I just think, I don't want this to sound snotty. I was so blown away by Idina Menzel's performance. And, Tangled, who was it that sang the lead?
Mandy Moore.
Mandy Moore. Yeah, it was okay. I just thought that it was, they really had to get a sort of a Broadway style, wicked singer, forgive the pun, to pull off that music. It was just so demanding, and it felt more like a musical to me. I don't know. I think Tangled was great. And Tangled was like so surprising because it was suddenly like Walt Disney Animation is just back, with a vengeance. And I really liked it. I just thought that Frozen was like, oh my God, look what they've done. And it came out of nowhere too. That was the thing. And with Tangled, you kind of have vague ideas of Rapunzel, but I don't think a lot of people, including myself, really are familiar with the Hans Christian Andersen story that inspired Frozen. And so it seemed kind of new and fresh and exciting and kind of twisted everyone's expectations on sort of very familiar storytelling tropes and how the sisters save each other. And it was just neat. It was also a great experience. I saw it in the theater when it opened as opposed to seeing it on rental or Blu-ray or whatever. And so I just loved it,
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, do you have a favorite Disney film?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a few. I mean, I grew up on that 70s Robin Hood.
Yes.
Yes, I was about to ask. It seems to be like the theme with a lot of people I know is it's like, when Robin Hood came out, I like those.
Yeah, that was Greg Weisman's favorite too. Remember he talked about that. Yeah, he inspired a lot of his Rebels storytelling.
Yeah, and the same guy that wrote the music for Big River, which is a musical I did back in the day, based on Huck Finn, wrote the music for that. Robin Hood, Little John running through the forest, wondering what the other has to say. It's like this kind of like folksy country thing, and it was just, I don't know, it was great. I have really fond memories of that one. I love Winnie the Pooh because, again, I grew up on it, and
yes. Thank you. You just validated my Pooh Bear-ness.
Your Pooh Bear-ness.
Yes.
Validated. And they re-recorded it a few years ago, but there was the original one from that was a series of short cartoons that they put in the movie. And again, the Sherman Brothers, between that and Mary Poppins was kind of my exposure to them and all of that music. I loved Mary Poppins as a kid. I guess those would probably be it. No, you know what it is? I know what my favorite one is. It just hit me like a bolt of lightning. It's Mickey's Christmas Carol.
Oh, that's a really great pick. Because it's not a traditional pick, and that's a good movie.
Because I love the holiday season. I love Christmas, and that thing would come on TV every year, and I would look forward to it. It had all those cartoons at the top. And then it wasn't released forever. I mean, there were a few years where I'd watch it on YouTube at Christmas time. And then it finally came out, and I think I bought it digitally or something. But yeah, I love that one. And I love A Christmas Carol. And it's only like 20 minutes long, but with all the cartoons on it in the front, it's a little bit long.
Well, and now they have the sequel to it, because there's the second Mickey's Christmas Carol also. Yeah.
Oh, really?
There's another one. I have the double pack or whatever of the holiday Mickey movies on Blu-ray.
Wow.
Yeah, they're good. They're good. I like them. Now, as far as, do you have a favorite era of Disney films that's the most enjoyable for you? Because I'm sure you've got the Renaissance, and then you have the dark period, which is like Chicken Little and Home on the Range and all of that stuff. But do you have like an era of the films that you really like a lot?
I guess. I mean, I love the classic stuff. When I was a kid, I loved Cinderella because my mom loved that one, and I remember seeing it with my mom and my aunt when I was a kid. It was re-released in theaters. I love all the classic era stuff. I love the waltz stuff. We did the Walk in Walt's Footsteps tour at Disneyland once, and I just loved it. I love the history of Walt Disney and Disneyland, so I love that era. I don't know. The whole Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and Aladdin, those were out when I was a little older, right? So Little Mermaid came out when I was, really into like Led Zeppelin. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
it didn't jive with your time period as well.
It did. No, it didn't. And that's like a real thing, when things a certain time in your life. And so I liked those movies. I remember, as a teenager going with a bunch of other teenagers to see Beauty and the Beast and thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. But it doesn't hit you and kind of own you the way that stuff does when it hits you at different times of your life, the way that sort of classic stuff did. But Pixar just, blew me away. I was lucky enough to work a little bit on Toy Story 2 as an intern, and that was before the sale of Pixar to Disney. And at that time, I think there was one movie that I really loved, which is kind of during that dark period, which is The Emperor's New Groove.
Oh, that's one of my favorites, all-time favorites.
Because David Spade and John Goodman and Eartha Kitt and Patrick Warburton, they're so good in that movie.
Yeah.
But this new era of Disney animation is great. I saw Zootopia recently and was just totally blown away by it. But I guess I'd have to say the classic stuff is probably still kind of my favorite, although it's kind of rivaled by this new stuff. I mean, the new stuff is really, not blowing smoke. It's really exciting. Like, there's just so much great content coming out now. But even the short films that they do,
Oh, yeah.
Good.
What was it? The Piper, I think, was the latest one.
I love Piper.
Yeah, the little sandpiper. He's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, I love the little short films. Oh, sounds like Charlie, it sounds like somebody's home and Charlie's barking. My dog.
That's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
What else? Yeah.
Well, do you have an animation style that you prefer to watch? Like, just as like that you visually prefer? Like, because I know I really like classic, the actual cell animation a lot.
I like the classical. So I like the sort of flat stuff. Are you talking about kind of the multi-planed?
Yeah, with the multi-plane camera and having the, the painted backgrounds with the, and your different cells being laid on top of each other, that kind of business.
I love that stuff, honestly. Like, I don't know if you've been to the Walt Disney Family Museum in San Francisco, but they actually have the machine there. And it's 2 stories high. So when you're in the second floor of the museum, you're looking down at the shot, and and you can see all the different plates.
Wow.
As the camera's pointed towards the floor, but it's 20 feet up in the air, and then they have all these shelves with glass plates with like trees or whatever painted on them that they're pulling, that they're manually pulling as the camera is pushing down, and then the bottom of the thing is in the gift shop. So if you're at the gift shop, look up and you're like, oh wow, that stuff I just think is so interesting, like the innovation. And they have a whole section about how Steamboat Willie was the first synchronized sound to an animated cartoon. Mm-hmm. They just figured out how to do it, and they did everything in rhythm, and they kind of have a whole you can see documentaries and read about that stuff too, of course, but like it's neat to walk through the museum and see how they did it, and how Silly Symphonies were really just kind of a technological push in synchronized sound for Walt Disney in order to get them to his real dream, which was Snow White. And there's a whole thing about how everyone thought he was nuts for trying to do a feature animated film, because who wants to sit and watch a 90-minute cartoon? And no one's going to take it seriously because you can't do real drama with cartoons. It's really neat. Like I love the, and I don't know if it's more common now in fandom, or if it's the Star Wars in me, but I love the how they did it almost as much as watching the thing itself.
No, I agree with you. I love talking about all that stuff, and it's part of the reason actually that I got into doing Disney Vault Talk, which is my Disney Films podcast, because we go into the history for each film and all of that stuff. It's so fun.
Oh, neat. I got to check that out. Yeah, I love that stuff. And I think that stuff is actually more interesting to talk about than 3D animation is, because it's, if you've ever been, working at a game developer forever, or, if you're ever looking at an animation studio, it's a bunch of people with headphones on staring at monitors. Like, it's not as exciting as this giant thing coming through the floor with a camera ending up in the shop. Like, that's really neat, like they had to build that back in the day and figure it out. And you got a bunch of, engineers and like suspenders and newspaper caps, like, oh, how are we going to do this? Well, we got to pull this here. All right, you Johnny, you pull it this time. All right, you do this, Like, I love the kind of innovation and innocence of that, as opposed to, computer animation where you can pretty much do anything.
Did you see the Rogue One toy? I'm trying to think, the advertisement that they did with the stop action with the toys that they put out.
Motion?
Yeah, stop motion. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. It's just something different and not usual. Get people to use the figures and try to make stories of their own.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I did see that. That was great. I got to go for Star Wars show, went to Stupid Buddy Studios, where they do Robot Chicken.
I love that it's called Stupid Buddy.
Yeah, stupid with 2 O's. And I got a tour, and they had all these sets in a warehouse that were just open, and and they're showing how they were just filming, one frame at a time, and then moving the figures, and then shooting the next frame. And I'm like, God, you got to do that 30 times a second. Wow.
That makes me so
really hard.
impatient. Yeah, I don't think I could do that.
But what's interesting is they had like 30 sets up at once, and each one was like, and they had this whole board of like what was shooting on what stage, and these producers with walkie-talkies. It was so neat, but like, yeah, really time consuming. But I'm just so clever, and that Rogue One ad, super cool. By the way, are you guys gonna plan anything special with Fangirls Going Rogue, the year of Rogue One?
Well,
you have the perfectly named podcast this year.
I have made a logo already, Fangirls Going Rogue One. So that's exciting.
That was one of those moments where we were like texting each other. We're like, dude, how did that happen? Like, we have Rogue in our name before they even named the movie. So yeah, we were excited about that.
Well, at least now everybody's going to know how to spell the word rogue.
Exactly. And we were one up on everyone else by knowing how to spell rogue already.
Yeah, Rouge won. Right?
Yep, Rouge won.
Even Alan Tudyk tweeted it wrong.
Rouge won.
Yeah, it was funny.
Well, do you know that story, David, about the first the first logo we got for Fangirls Going Rogue? It was spelled wrong. It was Fangirls Going Rouge, and I'm like, typo.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So yeah, but I mean, it happens all the time. But it was just kind of funny because I'm like, yeah, I know we're not that.
Kind of changes the whole aspect of the podcast.
Well, if you were doing a Moulin Rogue podcast,
Yes.
or Moulin Rouge, yeah, there is a Fangirls Gone Rouge that they're still singing "Come What May."
Yes.
Only if we can have you, McGregor. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not that podcast.
No. Well, I know, David Collins, you do a lot of voice acting now. And back to Disney, if you could voice any Disney character, what would it be or who would it be?
Well, if I had the opportunity to do Han Solo in anything, of course I would do it. I guess it's a Disney character. But if it was like an animated character,
yeah.
I'd love to get into one of those shows where you get to you get to be an action person, but you get to sing and you get to do all that kind of stuff. I'd love to do a movie like that sometime, or even a TV show or something like that. I would love to. Like, I was so impressed. That was the other thing is like when I heard Kristen Bell was Anna, I was like, who did they get to sing? And they're like, no, that's Kristen Bell. And I was like, I didn't know she could sing like that. I would love to do something like that. But I don't know. I mean, I would take like guard number 5 that gets to yell, they're over there or whatever. Like I would be thrilled. I would be beyond thrilled. I'd be like, oh my God, check it out.
Aww.
That's really awesome. And before we kind of move on, I have some questions about the parks for you, but you keep bringing up Pixar, and I just have to know for my own personal self, what's your favorite Pixar movie?
Wow. I remember for the longest time it was Toy Story 2. For the longest time, because there was that When Somebody Loves You
yeah,
that just destroyed me. And
yeah,
it's like, this is horrible. No, in the best way. That was one of them. And, I'm not everybody feels this way about this movie. I feel like it's a very polarizing movie for people, but Inside Out really, really just like struck a chord with me. It was like, there was just something about how sort of carefully crafted the metaphor was and the different characters and the performances, and I don't know, I just loved it. And the short before that, the lava short before that, I loved Inside Out and Michael Giacchino's score. There's been so many great Pixar movies over the years, but those two immediately jump to mind because Inside Out was just in 2015, right? I mean,
yeah.
How do you make something so unique and original when you're so inundated with so many different things to watch? And that really just captured my attention in a way that I wasn't expecting.
Wow. And now once you have your child, watch Inside Out again.
Yeah,
and I'm
exactly.
sure it'll mean something different to you because one of my friends recently had a kid, she's about 2 now. And when he watched Inside Out, he was like, whoa, that movie just completely floored me, being a parent now. So, yeah, you'll have to go back to that one.
I know, the psychology of it.
Yes.
Definitely.
Phyllis from The Office, is that her name?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, Phyllis.
Yes.
Funny. And Bill Hader and Amy Poehler and, everyone's just great in that movie.
All right, so here's the big polarizing question. We're going to talk about polarizing stuff. Disney World or Disneyland?
I have an easy out for this one. It is definitely Disneyland. I like Disney World, but I didn't go to Disney World for the first time until 2010. God, I suppose I should say Disney World in some regard because that was kind of my first date with Lauren was
That's right.
Yeah.
at Hollywood Studios, and we went on Rock and Roller Coaster about a dozen times because the park was virtually empty. So I should say Disney World has a lot of really, really fond memories for me. But the thing about Disneyland that's so special is, I grew up going there, I went with my family, and then this is a true story. Stop me if you've heard this. My older brother, he's 3 years older than me, he won a car at Disneyland.
What?
It's a true story. My older brother, Chad Collins, won a car in summer of 1986. They were still celebrating the 30th anniversary of Disneyland, and they were giving away a car every day.
Whoa.
I think it was every day. It might have been once a week, but they were still giving away cars to people as you came in through the front gates. And I don't know if he was like the 30,000th person through the door or some magic number, but he went through the turnstile and all these alarms went off and they pulled him aside and he won this was in 86 and he was 14 years old at the time. He wasn't even old enough to.
Whoa.
This is a true story. He won a Pontiac Firebird red sports car, with the flaming bird on it, when he was 14 years old from Disneyland.
So did he drive it eventually?
He did. And he drove it all through high school, all through college. I think it eventually died after college. But he won a car and was the coolest kid in my hometown for a while. Wasn't even old enough to drive it. And here's the funny thing. It was like a junior high youth trip. And I wasn't old enough to go on that trip. He went with his friends. He gave his girlfriend at the time cuts through line, like did like the after you thing, like after you. She went through. They're still friends, and I still think they joke about it. But he was like, "Yeah, hey, you go first." And then of course, the thing wins, or the thing goes off, and he wins a car. But
so she let her go through first.
Yeah.
And then he went.
And he won, right? And then what happened was the following year, I was going to be in 7th grade, and so I was finally old enough to go on the junior high trip, right? Because it was like 7th and 8th graders or 7th, 8th, 9th graders, whatever. And my brother wasn't going to go because he went last year and won a car. So about a week before I was supposed to go, my brother broke out with chicken pox. And I avoided him like the plague. I was like, I am not going to get chicken pox. I'm going on this trip. Sure enough, like the night before I'm supposed to go, I get these little like boom, boom, boom.
Oh, no.
Right as he's better. Right. And well, the trip's already paid for. So Chad, why don't you go, since you're better, and David, I'm sorry you have to stay. So he went again the following year. So like I grew up with this obsession about Disneyland from a very young age. And so when I was in high school and I'd spend some time down in Southern California, I would go with my friends all the time. Like I couldn't get enough of Disneyland. I was just fascinated by it. In fact, I was a bigger Disneyland fan than I was a Disney fan, just because it was such an interesting place to me. Plus they had Star Tours, because I was still a diehard Star Wars fan. And plus they had, I thought Captain EO was amazing. And I thought, the roller coasters, I thought Space Mountain was incredible. Like I just loved the park. I just thought the park was amazing. And so for that reason, Disneyland is kind of, and it's the original. There's just something so cool about it. But I love them both. What about you guys? Are you...
Well, you would actually get along with my husband very well because he's a huge Disney park. Like he loves Disney, but he loves the parks and the operation of the parks and all of that sort of nitty gritty stuff of running the park business. He loves all of that. And we're Disney World fans, though, because that's where we met. It's sort of funny that you said your first date was at Hollywood Studios with Lauren, because our first date was at Hollywood Studios in 2011. And so it's just kind of funny. But yeah, and then we got married at Disney World and engaged there.
Did?
So yeah.
And I'm sorry if you've already covered this on the show, but whereabouts at Disney World?
So we got engaged at the Contemporary overlooking Bay Lake, and then we got married over at the Swan and Dolphin Hotel over by Epcot. We had our reception at Fulton's Crab House at downtown Disney, and then we did a dessert party at the Grand Floridian for the Wishes fireworks and had the music from the park piped into our dessert party thing.
Fulton's Crab House, is that the one with the car boats?
It is now. Well, the car boats are kind of like right next to it. They're redoing Fulton's, but it was the big white, sort of like boats.
Oh, yes, yeah. It's under construction right now, right?
Yeah, it's under construction. Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, because we were just there in June for the meetup and we couldn't go. And we went to the one that was next to the boats. Downtown Disney's cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've done so much to it. But I have to say, I really love Disneyland. It's like smaller and more quaint, and it's easy to get around. Whereas Disney World, you have to wait so long to get somewhere.
Now, you just went to Disneyland Paris, right? You just did you just...
I've been there. I didn't just go there. Richard and I went on our honeymoon in 2009.
Okay. Well, what did you think of that?
Yeah, I was just there too.
Oh.
For the right before celebration, and I was there during the Euro Cup, so there was no one in the park.
Oh.
No lines anywhere. So it might be my favorite right now.
Nice. And that is also kind of small. Like, it's easy to get around. You can walk from your hotel to the parks, and they're right next to each other, so you can just walk.
Yeah. Well, if you go to Disneyland Paris, you have to stay at the Disneyland Hotel because you literally walk out your door and you are in Disneyland. So I don't know if you could get any better than that.
That's cool. And what did you think compared to Disneyland in terms of like or Disney World, like the rides, or like they're the same but they're different, you know? What did you think of that?
Well, yeah. Tomorrowland's more like steampunk land. So Space Mountain's kind of like Jules Verne. You're going to get shot up to the moon or something like that. I don't know. But Jedi Training Academy is the coolest thing ever over there. It's like the whole concession area is built around this stage for the kids. And you could just eat and people can watch. And there's this huge stage and they can levitate R2-D2. And there's banners all around with Rey and Kylo, and they show Star Wars Rebels on this huge screen while you're eating. And that's like the coolest thing. I hope that Star Wars Land has something like that for here in Disney World and in Disneyland, because that's like the coolest thing, is just to be able to watch the kids and kind of experience that. So, and obviously the castles are bigger anywhere than you go back to Disneyland, because that's where I went when I was a kid, because we lived in California off and on, and my dad was from LA, and I remember going and thinking the castle was so big, and then now I go back and I'm like, oh wow, the castle's so small.
And it doesn't have a giant dragon underneath either.
That is the coolest thing ever, is the dragon in Paris. Yeah. And you can't take pictures of it. Video doesn't work in there. You can only go in and experience it. It's so cool.
I would definitely go back. I went in 92, right when it opened.
Oh.
And there was nobody there. And I thought it was neat. I mean, at the time, I don't even think they had Space Mountain. I think they had Thunder Mountain Railroad, Pirates of the Caribbean, they had Star Tours, they had Captain EO, they had a couple of things, they had some dark rides, but it was really empty. That's what I remember about it the most. That and of course, no one, I didn't speak French and no one spoke English, and so I spoke broken Spanish the entire time, which was really just really funny. I think you actually mentioned that when you were talking about it on your last episode. It's like, well, I speak Spanish to people? Like, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any other the parks that you've been to? Any of the other ones?
No, I really would love to check out the Shanghai Park, and I'd love to check out Tokyo. I hear they're both kind of their own thing. I haven't. My wife, she's done the Disney Cruise Line. She's done Castaway Keys. She's done all that stuff. I haven't done any of that stuff. But I hear it's incredible.
Yeah, that's probably my next thing, is definitely a Disney Cruise Line. We did want to just ask you a couple quick questions about hosting Celebration. How many celebrations have you hosted now?
I host, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7. I think I've done 7, although my first celebration was Celebration 3 in 2005. And what I was doing, and I think this is how I kind of got that gig, was I became friends with Mary Franklin as she was taking over all the events for all of Lucasfilm and LucasArts at the time. And I kept demoing at different gaming conventions. I'd demo what we were working on. And I started doing that in 2004, I think. And I just really wanted to get out of my, you're in this soundproof cave, like cutting lightsaber sounds. I wanted to go out and like talk to people about what we were doing, and, had a theater background and public speaking background. And so I started doing that, and we started working together because she was putting on, different conventions like E3 and some of these gaming conventions. And I think at one point she saw me hosting on the side of the stage there of a LucasArts booth on the show floor in 2005 at Celebration 3. And we were demoing every hour the Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith video game. And we'd had these huge crowds because the video game actually showed footage from the movie, and the movie wasn't out for another month.
Oh.
So people would show up just to see R2 pop out of the Jedi Starfighter and watch the Jedi battle droids, as they landed in the hangar at the top of the movie. We showed that in our demo like over and over again, and people would cheer every time R2 would come out. And so I was doing that every hour. And then after it was over, we were around Lucasfilm again, and I think I just saw her in the lunch dining common area or something. I said, and I joked to her, I said, if you ever need a host for Celebration, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And, I was just kind of joking about it, thinking, well, that would never happen. But I think I said it because I didn't know I didn't know all the hosts from Celebration 3. And lo and behold, she said, well, I want to take you up on that. And my first one was in 2007. So if I'm lucky enough to host again next year, I will hit my 10-year anniversary as a Celebration stage host. So here's hoping.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite celebration that you have either attended or hosted?
Probably Celebration Anaheim. They're all great. I mean, they're all so different, right? And every single one of them had something incredible. And I can think about a very specific memory from each of them. Like 2007 was the first time anyone saw the Clone Wars, and I got to host that panel. And Dave Filoni become a celebrity over a weekend. And I remember going to my first rehearsal for that up at Big Rock, and someone said, "You're going to meet with Dave Filoni," and I said, "Who's Dave Filoni?" Because I didn't know who he was, and come to find out, I had a picture with Dave because he was dressed as Plo Koon at San Diego Comic-Con in 2005, and I was working the booth demoing Battlefront 2, and I had a picture of the two of us together, and I was like, "Is that you?" He's like, "Yeah, that's me." So I had actually unknowingly met him once before. That was really cool in 2007. 2010, Season 3 of The Clone Wars, plus we were demoing Force Unleashed 2. That's where I met my wife. That was a hugely memorable time. 2012 was also really cool in Orlando. Star Wars Smuggler's Gambit, getting to do the radio drama, bunch of other cool stuff. 2013, Kathleen Kennedy, everything in Germany that we got to see. That was really, really fun. It was my first European celebration. The one in 2007 I couldn't do because of the Force Unleashed production schedule was crazy or something like that. I can't remember. And then Anaheim was just probably the biggest thing I'd ever seen. I mean, every single panel is just packed with stuff. I mean, it's like, how on your computer when you have to like force quit applications?
Yes.
Every hour I had to force quit out of one and just like hard boot up the next one and just completely forget about what just happened and focus on the 10 minutes that I have before we go on, because sometimes you just don't even get to talk to the panelists other than in an email, or things don't come together until the last minute and you're working at night in order for things to come together, and you're showing up early in the morning and trying to squeeze in rehearsal before the day starts, and you're just really, really working on trying to make all that happen. It's more frantic now than it ever has been. And I remember going into Celebration Europe this summer thinking, well, this will be easier. It's 3 days instead of 4. It was the same thing. Like, it was totally just like wall-to-wall amazing content, and staying up late and preparing keynote decks and clips and talking with people and sneaking in rehearsal early. And then, but you also want to go to this cool thing so you don't sleep. And like, by the end, when it was over, I slept for a day and a half solid.
Whoa.
I mean,
nice.
Do you ever just want to be like, does that excite you to no end, or do you ever just want to be like a con goer?
That's a great question. So I usually have like a little time to check things out, but I actually like to do stuff.
Right.
I think I'm like you guys in that I'd want to podcast live, or I'd want to be on a panel, or I'd want to like put on an event, or I'd want to do something,
Right.
And I wasn't always that way, but I just have gotten that way now, where I just want to be a part of it. And so I just feel really lucky to have those opportunities and do them. And so I do sometimes wonder, though, what I'm missing out on the other side. I don't get to see anything. But no, I feel so lucky to get to be a part of it.
There are a lot of people who would like to one day host a panel just at any con, and obviously they like what you're doing. So do you have any advice for people who are looking to, propose a panel? Like, what your panels run so well, like what do you think is important to make that happen?
That's such a good question. I hope I can do it justice. Let's see. I think the biggest lesson, and it's so hard because so much of it comes down to luck and opportunity. The biggest thing is to just be vocal about what you're passionate about and be a people person and get out there and talk to people just like we're talking now, and things just kind of happen. It's funny because I don't really do that much hosting outside of Celebration. I think I've done 1 or 2 Comic-Cons and 1 WonderCon, but there are people that find ways and they have a great idea for a panel. And if you have a great idea for anything that's unique, just believe in it and make it happen. And if you're enthusiastic about it, it'll happen. Like the Star Wars Oxygen's been a great lesson for me in that. And it wasn't my idea. It was Jimmy's idea. It was the whole podcast was Jimmy's idea because of a conversation we had. And he's like, you should do a podcast about this. I was just talking to him about, the year I started on the scoring stage at Skywalker. It's how I started my career, was working on the scoring stage at Skywalker Ranch. And he's like, you should do a podcast about music. People don't talk about that very much. Come to find out, everyone, it's a huge part of everyone's life, but it's a woefully underrepresented discussion in our conversations, partially because we don't have the language to speak about it.
Right.
Because it's so advanced in certain ways. So how do you speak about it in relatable ways that aren't, overly technical and are more story driven or something like that? But finding your unique voice and just being enthusiastic about it, suddenly, it just, things just kind of happen. Like, and as far as, how panels run, my first year I had cue cards, and I had hold these cue cards in my hand, and they made me very nervous because I'm going to ask this question, then I'm going to ask this question, then I'm going to ask this. And you have to do that to some degree. You have to plan to some degree. Right. You really do. You have to have your questions in advance, and you have to kind of know what you're doing. It's very helpful. However, if you aren't able to digest it and find what interests you about those questions, you become kind of owned by those questions. And what it does, in my experience, is it would cut off my ability to listen. And sometimes people would say something that would trigger an honest question in me that I personally want to know the answer to. And so after a while, I just ditched the cue cards and started asking. And if I ran out of stuff, then I would kind of go back to my bag of like, well, I kind of know I wanted to ask this too. So let's switch subjects because I want to make sure before the hour's done that we touch on X, Y, Z. But if I'm in the moment and Dave Filoni or Pablo or whoever says something cool, I want to follow up on it because I don't want to let that nugget go just because my next question says I'm supposed to now talk about X-Wings or whatever. Like I really want to, chase something that they bring up, and then that way it becomes a passionate conversation in front of an audience, and it makes you so much less nervous. That's the other thing. You just talk and you're like, you connect with somebody, and then they feel connected to and they feel listened to, and then they calm down a little bit. Madame Tussauds was like that. We did a panel with Madame Tussauds, and they had to get the Rey statue approved, and they had to go through all these hoops, and so that panel didn't come together for multiple behind the scenes reasons until the very last minute, and I didn't meet the panelists until 5 minutes before we went on.
Wow.
And so I had to like find what they clearly loved their job. They were all artists, right? What about their art made them tick? And if you just get them talking about it and like, oh, I noticed you did this cool thing there. Talk about her hair, because that, how hard was that? Oh, talk about how you weathered the costume. Talk about the sculpting. Talk about, and they would just light up, because we all have those things in common. So I just try and attack them as fast as possible, so that we don't sit there and have nothing to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That's
such great advice. I was actually talking to Anthony Bresnikan right before he did our podcast for Fangirls Going Rogue at Celebration for the live stage. And I was asking him about his panel at Anaheim. And he had said that he had wanted to ask, can we talk about, is Finn a stormtrooper? And they're like, well, obviously he's a stormtrooper. And he said he's like, well, but Han's been in a stormtrooper costume and Luke's been in a stormtrooper costume. So no, he's not obviously a stormtrooper. And so the people that he was talking to about presenting were like, we know this and it's obvious. And he's like, no, I'm trying to ask like a fan. So, that's why I think, the interest, that when you talk about the interest in being able to draw that out in a panel, and I've gotten keyed up in the cards too. And then you're like, so they can almost make you more nervous. So just like, yeah, definitely. But every time you've ever run a panel, it's just that I've seen it's so natural. And so it's great to hear that you have the same learning curve that everybody else does. It's almost like you just have to do it. Like you have to do little panels and bigger panels.
Yeah, and be in the moment.
Yeah, Tricia, that is the advice right there, is you just have to do it. And it's going to be terrifying the first time you do it, and that's why you have to do it. That never goes away. You just have to get through your nerves in front of people. It start but start.
Well, if you've done theater, too, right? Things don't always happen. I was doing it was a review run at Duke University when I was there, and my costume actually fell apart and my wig came off, and we kept going, and then we were just like, no, this is too funny, and we started giggling, but it's just one of those things you just have to learn to deal with it. Things gonna happen, and you got to go on.
Yeah, call it out and be real. Be real. Sometimes things happen. Yeah, I mean. And Anthony Breznican, that's a whole other thing that, it's funny because I've never met him, but we follow each other on Twitter, and I've seen him from a distance being like, hey, and he's like, hey, he's really good. Like the panel of that scale where, Disney Studio is involved, and you've got Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams, and you've got the cast, and you've got 5,000 people, and you're broadcasting it out on a live stream to hundreds of thousands of people. That is a different level of pressure because you have to ask the cue card questions. Like I did a Lucasfilm and the Art of Storytelling panel where I had all the Lucasfilm executives on stage. I had to have questions.
Right.
And we had meetings upon meeting upon meeting. I still was able to just ask questions, and shoot from the hip. I had a great moment with John Knoll, where I was like, God, that sounds terrifying. He's like, no, it's exciting, and I was like, oh, and he kind of lit up, and I was like, I wanted to chase it, but I had to get back to the questions. The questions make you nervous, but sometimes you've got clips you have to set up, and you've got to make sure that everyone on stage gets a chance to speak. And what Gwendolyn Christie did and what Anthony Breznican did are very, very difficult. And I think you have to be a fan in order to navigate through that. You kind of have to know your stuff, but also know what your kind of corporate responsibility is, because you've got such a short time to put out exactly what you want to put out to so many people. He's great. I have to go back and hear your interview with him, because that sounds like
art of storytelling is one of my favorite panels.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that was a great panel, and I love how it seemed like Dave Filoni was going to be the natural closing speaker for that one.
Yeah. Well,
rightfully so.
He didn't come to rehearsal, right?
Okay, that's the joke.
That's why everyone was looking at him.
Yeah, and he's like, so this is the part where I come in on the closing pithy thing. Is that what it says on that paper there? Something like that. And I was like, yes, Dave, that's what it said at rehearsal too. No. He was great, but that's a great example. He got to the point where he didn't show me clips anymore for the Clone Wars or Rebels. They're like, we'll show it to you on stage. And so in 2012, we did this panel, and I knew that George Lucas was going to come out on stage and sit there after the last clip and surprise everybody in the crowd, right? And so the plan was I was going to do the thing. The last Clone Wars Season 5 clip, I'll leave the stage, and George will come up, and he'll sit there, and Joel, Aaron, and Dave and George will talk, right? But nobody knew he was coming. It wasn't advertised, right? Well, I knew he was backstage because I saw him backstage before I went on. And I'm looking at these Clone Wars clips, and I've never seen them before. And Dave, I think, loves that at this point. He's like, no, just whatever. Just look at the clip and just ask me whatever you want to ask me. That's cool. Yeah. But I'd never seen it before. There was no preparation. They barely ran it the morning of to make sure that it was framed properly on the screen. And then I just saw the Onderon stuff, and I saw all that stuff, and I just asked questions that came to my head. And when it was over, Dave introduced me to George backstage, and he goes, He goes, George, this is David Collins. I'd met him before, but well, he's not going to remember. It was like 10 years before or something like that. And he goes, oh, great job. It sounded rehearsed. Like, he both complimented me and told me that he knew that I was like on, going, by the seat of my pants,
Aww.
And Lynn Hale was like, he doesn't compliment people a lot, so you should remember that one, And that was like one of the highlights of Celebration for me ever was George Lucas listening to me basically wing it from backstage.
Wow.
But you just, if you're a fan, you can do that. You can just talk about whatever interests you. I mean, you guys can do that, That's my biggest piece of advice, is just talk about what you love.
Awesome.
That's really good. And we have one last question we want to ask before we let you go, because I'm just really curious. I've never gotten to talk to you about Star Wars Rebels before. So this question actually comes from one of my fellow podcasting co-hosts, Aaron Goins. He and I do Star Wars Bookworms, and he wanted to know, do you think that Ezra and Kanan will survive Star Wars Rebels?
It's a good question. I didn't think that Ahsoka was going to survive, but she did. If I had to guess, it's still kind of up in the air. I would guess that it depends on how many seasons the show runs, how those characters develop, what's a hit, what isn't. I'm sure that those debates are happening. I wish I knew. I have no idea. Well, actually, if I did know, I wouldn't be answering the question and speculating. I have no idea because I don't know. But I mean, it would make sense if they didn't, just like it would have made sense if Ahsoka didn't. But I think they probably will in some way, shape, or form. I mean, now Kanan's been blinded. So they're definitely going to take their hits. Ezra, I just don't know. That's the thing about every time you introduce a Force sensitive, and what do you guys think? I mean, I think they probably will survive. So I'll stop being wishy-washy and say they probably will in one shape or form. They will survive, but it could be in a way that we're not picturing, like Ahsoka.
Right.
I think they're probably going to die and that Darth Maul will live forever. There we go.
But what do you do to the kids who are major fans of these characters? Like, that's why I think they can't necessarily kill them off.
Bambi.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Bambi's mom. They didn't kill Bambi.
Well, I know, but seriously. I mean, think about how much death there are in Disney movies, Sarah.
Yeah,
really.
Okay, that's right. Disney took over Star Wars. Death is in Disney movies.
Yeah, death is a very prominent theme.
Frozen.
Yep. It's true.
I was staring at a Pepsi can in 1999 with Jake Lloyd on it as young Anakin Skywalker, and then looking at the children's books coming out of young Anakin Skywalker, just going, if I was 3 or 4 or 5 when this movie came out and I saw this kid, I'd want to see that movie, and I would have no idea that kid is going to become Darth Vader, right? So there is a precedent for, adorable, heroic characters having all kinds of bad things happen to them and by them. So I mean, I suppose in that regard, anything can happen, but I guess I just kind of doubt it,
That confirms it. Ezra is Snoke. There we go.
There it is. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us, David. Do you have anything that you want to plug or let anybody know about where they can find you on social media or any of that stuff?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I'm at David W. Collins on Twitter. You can chat with me there. And then Star Wars Oxygen, the music of John Williams. If you haven't checked it out and you're a Star Wars fan, you don't necessarily have to be a musician to appreciate it. We keep it talking about story and talking about themes and talking about Star Wars. There's a couple things that I've done recently in terms of voiceover. I did a cute little show that was just released on Netflix called Botter Snikes and Gumbles, which is kind of this cute little show that just came out. And I've been doing some anime recently and a couple other things. And yeah, and go see The Force Awakens if you haven't. I get this. No, but yeah, you can find me on Twitter and look forward to chatting with anybody who wants to chat Star Wars and anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. We appreciate it. And good luck in the couple of months that follow.
This has been great. I'm so glad we finally got to do this. And and thank you so much for the invitation. It's really been fun.
So that's it from us for this time around. You can catch us on our next episode, which will be episode 37. But in between now and then, if you want to hang out with us, go over to fangirlsgoingrogue.com and you can find everything you need to know about the show. On Twitter, we are at FGGoingRogue. Tricia is at Fangirl Cantina. I am at Ice Cold Penguin. And Sarah is at Jedi Tink.
If you want to leave us an email about this episode, go ahead and go to contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com or talk about it on Facebook, Fangirls Going Rogue, or check out any of our awesome pics, lots of Star Wars Rebels, on Tumblr, fangirlsgoingrogue.tumblr.com.
And on Instagram, we are at FGGoingRogue. You can also leave us a voicemail about this episode, and you might get played on the next show. And that is 33121-EWOKS. And please, if you want to check out Fangirls Going Rogue t-shirts, they are available at TeePublic, and you can find those through our website, fangirlsgoingrogue.com.
And please go to iTunes and leave us a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews. They're like our lifeblood. And if you don't want to leave us a positive review, then just skip that part.
That's right. All right, guys. So until next time. Da 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 da. Yup. Yup.